can tell you about herself. We do know that she won the competition, the photography competition at the Beekeepers Club?
Yep.
Yeah, so we know she knows what she's talking about, so we'll hear what she's got to say.
Oh my goodness. Hopefully that's doing what it needs to do. My name is Amanda. Thank you so much for having me. It's such a privilege. There is a presentation that I've prepared, and we might just do it a bit order. I'll talk a little bit first, and then we'll see some beautiful photographs, which aren't mine. I'll show you mine to show you how things can go wrong, and then we'll show you some other photographs to show you how things can look really beautiful from the professionals. So I'm going to start by saying I am not a professional photographer. I am a photographer who has a camera and some bees and some flowers and sometimes a bit of time to sit there and take some photographs. Who are the professional photographers in the audience? Seriously, because, okay, so none of us, good, I'll make it all up. Because if you've got some tips or pointers or something you know or something that you disagree with what I'm saying, just jump in and let's make it more of a conversation than a presentation. So we'll have a look at the photograph when the other laptop comes. We'll have a look at that photograph. I haven't even brushed my hair today. It's been such a crazy morning. I'm feeling a bit all over the shop. So this is the camera that I use. I thought for some of you that are photographers are interested, it's a Nikon. I prefer Canon, but I've ended up somehow with a Nikon. It's got a standard lens on it, and I often just keep this one on. I think it's an 80 I've also lost my glasses today. It's been a crazy morning. 80 to 250 maybe, something like that, this camera. I also sometimes pull this one out, and this is the one that I used for the photograph that we have swapped glasses before, so 18 to 140, I was totally out of it. And this is the other lens that I've used as a macro lens, 70 to 300 mil. So this enables you to get in really nice and close. So I just thought for those that are interested, that's the camera, and I've got a couple of different lenses. That's all I have. I have nothing. I have no wide angle, and I have no bigger lenses. The other camera, and I also won third prize in the competition at the Beekeepers Club using this camera, which is really interesting. It's not just an iPhone, it's a 5, so it's really, really old. The cameras, the 6, they started making really good camera functionality on the iPhone, so this is a 5, and I took a photograph just with that, and that actually won third prize, which we'll have a look at in a minute. So I'll start off with the technical stuff and then the other stuff. So the technical stuff, you can have a digital SLR, single lens reflex camera, or you can have an Android phone, or you can have an iPhone, or an instant camera, or an automatic camera. One of my tips is just always carry a camera with you. And if you're out wandering, it's a great place to see some bees, particularly in your backyard. So always have a camera, one of my tips. So you can have any sort. You can have a DSLR, or you can have your phone camera. So which lens to you? There's lots of different lenses. You can have a standard lens, or you can have a macro lens, and then you have to start playing around with the settings a bit more, but there's some questions to ask about lenses. You don't need an ultra expensive macro lens to take good photographs of bees. And a tripod, to use a tripod or not. There are two stories around whether a tripod is good or not. Some people that photograph insects and bees say you're wasting your time with a tripod because the bees are moving so quickly. You need to be moving all the time as well, so don't waste your time with a tripod. And you're often using a fast shutter speed to capture more of a still moment with a bee, so there's not a need for a tripod because you've got a slower shutter speed. But yes, use a tripod and get it all set up and have it focusing in the general area, but as soon as you're zooming in, you're going to be moving all the time. So you might want to use one, you might not. The faster the shutter speed, the less need there is to use a tripod. If you use a really slow shutter speed, then you'll need to pop it on a tripod. So the other point there, I've got aperture or f-stop. I don't know how much you care about this, but this essentially is inside the lens. There's a hole, and it can be bigger or smaller. At the lower the number of the f-stop, the larger the hole or the aperture, and that means the shorter depth of field. What all that means is that things in the foreground of the photograph are going to be really sharp and in focus, and the black background will be quite blurry. And if you have a larger f-stop, smaller aperture, that means more things will be in focus. So if I had a small f-stop and I was photographing here, these people in the front row would be really sharp and in focus, and those of you at the back would be more blurry. So if I increase the f-stop, increase the number, then I'll have sort of everything for distance, that's for scenic landscape shots, more will be in focus. So in terms of taking photographs of bees, you'll use a small f-stop number, and that gets a really sharp picture of the bee in the foreground, and then you get a blurry background. And if we get to see some photographs, we'll see how that works. So when I say maybe 3.2 to 5.6 is the f-stop you might want to use for bees to have the blurry background, but you can go up to 8 or 11. And if you've got an SLR, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you don't, this will sound crazy. But you can manipulate the depth of field to have blurry background and a really sharp focus in the foreground. So shutter speed is obviously how quickly the lens opens and shuts, and that impacts how much light gets into the camera, and it also impacts the sharpness of something that's moving. So if you have a really slow shutter speed, it goes open and shut. So anything moving is going to be a bit blurred because the lens is open for a bit longer, but you'll let more light in. So if you want to get a picture, and I've struggled to do a good one yet, which is a bee flying or hovering in front of a flower, you want to have a really sharp shutter speed so it goes bang, and then you've captured that bee in the moment of stillness, and sometimes you can get the wings that are still. So really fast shutter speed to get the movement, to stop the movement and to get the bee still, and a slower shutter speed will make it brighter, but you'll get some movement. Sometimes you want movement. So sometimes if you get the wings moving, it gives that impression of something moving. But if you want to have a look at have a really sharp image, you'll choose a faster shutter speed. ISO is the speed of the, if you use print film, it's the speed of the film. So if you have a higher number ISO, you'll have a faster speed film. But if you want to blow your images up, they'll be grainier. So you want to have a 100, 200 ISO to make sure that you've got a good enough image to not be grainy if you're going to make posters. But that influences the light that gets into the image as well. A lot of the cameras, there's a button on here that says auto, and if you put it on that, it will just work out the best ISO shutter speed and aperture for the image, but it doesn't know that you're taking a picture of a bee. And so you won't necessarily get a fast enough shutter speed to get the stillness. So you can use auto if all else fails. Sometimes what I do is I'll take an image on auto first, just in case I mess it up myself, and then I'll play around with the other settings and I'll say, what we call prioritise the shutter speed, and I'll put it up really fast. So say 1/1000th of a second that the shutter's open for to really capture a sharp image. And the camera will automatically tell me the ISO and aperture to give me a good exposure. Or you can do it all manually. But we're talking about bees who spend 2 or 3 seconds on a flower. You don't have a whole lot of time. So using auto is sometimes helpful, but you won't necessarily get the shot. Yes, please.
The sport mode you see on...
Yep.
I've got a Canon.
Yeah.
Does that automatically do a faster shutter speed?
Yeah, it does. So when you put it on sports mode, it'll automatically say, yeah, I want it to be faster. So that's definitely worth having a go. In sports mode, I'm always thinking of Grand Prix cars going around the circuit. You can put it in sports mode and you can zoom your camera along, pan the camera along as the cars go past. And what that does is you get the car clear and the crowd in the background will be blurring. It gives you that impression of something that's moving fast. But chuck it in sports mode. And what I'd say to do is try them all. Try all the different ones. You can try the macro lens, try the sports mode, try a twilight shot. Some of them have an insect mode as well, and that would be like a macro, like for the flowers, yeah. The last couple here, lighting, to flash or not to flash. I often try it with both. I don't like using flash photography ever because I always think it changes what I'm looking at and it creates bright spots on the image. But generally, if you're using a really fast shutter speed. Remember I said that there isn't as much light that gets into the camera, so you might want to use flash to lighten up the subject because you're not going to get as much natural light coming in, but that also might distort what you're looking at because you've put some non-natural light on the subject. So have a go with the flash, have a go without the flash. I'll just quickly jump down to post-production, which is a really important point. That's all the time you spend after you've been out taking photographs, sitting in front of your computer, manipulating the image to make it do all the things that you forgot to do at the time. So you can highlights and shadows, you can make the darker bits lighter, the bits that are a bit overexposed darker, you can blur the edges with a vignette, you can saturate the colours a little bit more. You can actually make one colour stand out, so you can highlight the yellow bits in the photograph and have everything else black and white and yellow. So there's a whole lot of post-production that you can do to tidy things up. So when I get to the other stuff, we'll talk about that a bit more. Finally, RAW versus JPEG. That is, I don't even know how to describe that in any other way except when I take a JPEG, you'll all be familiar with JPEG because that's how we see images normally with JPEG. A RAW image captures more information separately when you take the photograph, so you can manipulate it more. And in layperson's terms, essentially, a JPEG image on this camera might be about 5 or 7 megabytes. A RAW image is about 30 megabytes per image. So I've set my camera to take RAW and JPEG of the same image, and then I end up slowing down my computer because I've got lots and lots of images of 30 megabytes. So, but what that does, it enables you to play around with the settings more because it's captured much more information of that image than JPEG. The JPEG summarises the image that you're taking, and RAW image is what a lot more professionals use. Taking in RAW enables you to crop photographs and keep resolution intact. So I'll take an image from far away of a bee on a flower in RAW, 30 megabyte picture, and I want to really zoom in and crop everything else out and just get to the bee on the flower. You still end up with a 7 megabyte image. If I did that with JPEG, I'd start with a 7 megabyte, zoom in and crop. I'd end up with something that might only be like 1 megabyte or less, which is fine for a screen, but if you want to start printing or perhaps displaying it, it'll start getting grainy and not very clear. So that's the choice between RAW and JPEG. And I'm not quite sure how sophisticated phone cameras are now. I think they're getting pretty good with what you can do with them. I'm going to upgrade soon and get a new one, but I don't know how much you can manipulate settings on the phone cameras. Does anyone? Yeah. So you can actually play around. So it's got the ISO, the shutter speed, and the aperture, and white balance as well. That just dictates the exposure. They do, so you can play around. So very soon, I mean, why would you carry this around? But there's a lot of things that you can do. And you look cool wandering through the airport this morning carrying your camera. I'm not a photographer. Yeah. So if we go on to the other stuff. So light. Now we'll use more layperson's terms. So light. Think about the time of the day that you're shooting. The golden hour, you may have heard about that. The mornings are... So with bees, I read this. I read a lot of stuff, so it might or might not be true. Bees are a bit in the morning, not morning beings. So they're a bit slower in the mornings. They're a bit easier to photograph because they're not moving around so much. There's a bit more dew around potentially. So mornings is a great time for bees because they haven't really woken up and got going yet, just like me. So mornings is a good time. The light in the mornings can be beautiful. The experts say that when it's a little bit overcast is better to photograph than when it's clear blue sky and sunshine. Also, you can get some beautiful shadow effects in the morning or the afternoon as well with photography. So think about the time of day. You don't always have the choice, but that can make a real difference between how your image looks, particularly with the shadows. So with the background, a lot of people have looked at this photograph where I won this prize. I feel really crazy. I feel like a fraud when I'm saying I won this big prize. It was just for fun. But anyway, it's got a beautiful green background, and everyone said, "Wow, how did you get the background? What did you use?" It's just the leaves behind the bee, and because I've zoomed in and because I used an aperture that made everything blurry in the background, it looks like I've got this beautiful screen behind the bee and it's posing beautifully on this flower with a backdrop. It's not at all. It's just because I've zoomed in and it's really blurry, so it's this beautiful colour. So think about the background. In terms of background, flowers that are flat make a good background as opposed to flowers with lots of depth and crevices, because the bees will move around and crawl into them. So the background, depending on the flower that you're looking at, look at like beautiful sunflowers and things, they've got a flat surface. So you can get a better image than bees that can crawl in and out and get amongst the shadows a lot. So that's another thing to think about background. The flower surface, that's just what I was mentioning as well. And the colour of the flowers will create different images. Bright pinks and yellows I particularly like. Patience. So, of course, everybody here has loads of time, all the time in the world, to sit around with your camera and just sit under a tree or a flower and photograph bees. Not really, but we should make the time. It's really, really therapeutic and meditative and relaxing, and be really mindful. So patience is important. And I think I've put there as well, it's like observe the bees. You can have a look and watch what's going on before you start taking the photographs. So have a look which flowers, are there particular flowers that the bees are going to? Are they flying in and flying out, or are they hanging around for a while? So have a look and see what they're doing, and then you can anticipate a little bit more what's going to happen, and then you can sort of take the photographs in expectation of what's about to happen, because it happens very quickly. I've put in here, take lots and lots and lots and lots of photographs and delete lots and lots and lots and lots of photographs. You know, you'll take 50, you should be taking 50, just wrap them off and then you can pick the best one, but don't be too scared to just ditch the bad ones. I know people that just keep all of their photographs and it's terrible, they're blurry, or the bee's not even in the photograph but they just haven't deleted it. So give yourself permission to take a lot, give yourself permission to delete a lot, really keep that the best one. But you need to take a lot. So sometimes you can put it on continuous shoot, so you hold your finger down and it goes, takes lots of photographs. You feel like you're, shooting models or something. It's pretty cool. And then you can have a lot of different frames, and the one that the bee's just about to land on the flower, or is in the flower, or just about to leave, pick the one that's in the right spot, just get rid of all the rest. So if you've got the time and if you've got the storage space on your card, continuous shooting mode is really good, and then you can just grab the one that looks good and get rid of the rest.
Do you find that the quality drops when you use that continuous?
Yeah, I do.
Most of them are terrible.
Yeah.
If you do fluke one, well, you do.
Yeah.
Usually I find it's not worthwhile.
Yeah. I also think I'm really competitive. Aren't I competitive, Linda? I'm very competitive. So I want to make it hard. Like, I want to see if I can get that one shot just once with one click. So I don't use that continuous mode very often. Also, takes up room, takes a lot of time. The hours I spent sitting in front of my computer editing and searching, and will I delete that one or that one? Is it that one or that one's best? It's crazy. But I do love sitting in there and editing them, but I find that as well. Yes?
How big is your camera?
I think I've got two 4 gigabyte cards. Yeah, and I have 2. There's a slot in my camera for 2. There's another thing. Make sure you've got a card in your camera. I've gone out specifically to take some photographs, only to get there and find that the card was still sitting in my laptop at home. So it was really sad. So you can take photographs, you just can't keep them. So I had this really interesting day of taking beautiful images and looking at them on the screen, and as soon as you go back to shoot the next one, it's gone. So it's very sad. Take a lot to the bum shot. How many people have got lots of pictures of bees' bums? That's all I seem to get, and I think I don't know. Yeah. I have loads of pictures of bees' bums, and I think that's just poor timing. Or I guess their face is in the flower, so their bum's sticking out. Sometimes it's a bit cute, but I don't know. I think the face shots are better. Look, here's some other tips that I haven't really thought too much about when I'm photographing, but I read as well. If you're remember I talked about aperture and depth of field. If you want to get the background a bit blurry to get the really sharp bee in the foreground, if you're shooting the face shot, then the bum's going to be a bit blurry too. So the suggestion is to try and get sideways with the bee, so the whole side of the bee will be in focus. Whereas if you've got the bee taking up foreground and background in the image, if you're really close, then the back of the bee is going to be a bit blurry because of that depth of field. It starts getting blurry. Really clear face, but a blurry bum. You've got the face shot. Yeah, so that was an interesting point about actually getting really close. It's, when I have done a bit of reading and read articles and things about bee photography, a common theme is getting stung. It doesn't even cross my mind. I get really up close and personal with the bees when I'm photographing them. And, well, I have beautiful Italian hippie bees, so they don't sting, except when they tried to kill me. But apart from that, I never thought about that. But I guess people that aren't apiarists but are photographers might be thinking about getting stung by bees if they're getting up and close and photographing them. So I don't think we need to worry about that. I think we know bee behaviour and how to behave around bees, and they're our friends. But another interesting point about the bees changing their behaviour because of you, when I said observe and spend the time, just being around the bees and the flowers, the bees that are there might get more used to you, so you're not going to impact their behaviour so much. So just being there and having your face in close or your lens in close, they might have the time to get used to you rather than just jumping in with a lens and scaring them away.
Just set your camera up there and leave it there for a little while.
Yeah.
And then come back later.
Yeah, exactly. 2 minutes of this comment. Another thing that I do is I look at a lot of photographs of bees. I follow a lot of bee sites on Instagram. I'm not a huge social media person, but I do spend a lot of time looking at photographs on Instagram. So what I do is I follow a lot of bee-type sites, and there's a lot of beautiful photography of bees that I see, and that gives me ideas. So I get a lot of my ideas about what to photograph just by looking at other photographs and go, oh, that's an interesting angle, or that's an interesting, the hover shot, probably not as interesting as the face shot. The bum shot can be interesting if there's a lot of pollen around. So I get an idea, oh, next time I might try that, or there was a beautiful sky image, or it's just not always a picture of bees. So I guess bee photography is not just about taking pictures of bees, but taking pictures of hives, taking pictures of equipment, or people doing beekeeping things. So I get some of these ideas by looking at a lot of other sites with a lot of photographs. And Instagram's got some particularly spectacular photographers who post their images, and I love looking at those, and I'm amazed at what you get to see. I've never taken pictures like these, and they're also very educational. So there are a few sites that I follow, and they've got such a great image of larvae in a cell, or a bee with its tongue out. You actually get to see how all of this stuff works and how the bees live and work by looking at this beautiful photography that's captured by the experts. So it's not amazing, right? It's not. I've seen really much more amazing photographs. So that's the picture that won the first prize. So for those that are interested, it's a Nikon 71,000. It's 18 to 140. The aperture, the f-stop I talked about, was 8, so it's sort of a bit higher, which means more depth of field in focus. 360, it's a reasonably fast speed, 140 mil, and 125. So 1/125th of a second is how long the shutter speed was open for. So it's still not really crystal clear. It also loses some of the clarity when it's expanded and enlarged. See that background that I was talking about? It looks like you've got a beautiful backstop screen to make it that green. That is just a leaf, and I've zoomed in and cropped so much that it's taken up the whole background. And because I had an aperture that's reasonably lower number, it has blurred it all, so you can't see any definition of the veins or anything in the leaf.
What's
so that
140 millimetre, Amanda?
that's how I'd zoomed, how much I'd zoomed. So I was fully zoomed, which basically means when it's little like that, it's at 18, and I had it right out. So I didn't even use my macro lens for this one. I just had it fully zoomed at 140 mil. So that's, you're getting in close. And sometimes, I get so carried away. I've got the camera. I'm almost touching the bee, and I can't work out why I can't focus. So sometimes you actually step away from the bee so you can get focus. Some people say you should always use manual focus as well, not autofocus, because that gives you a little bit of an option. If, depending on how your camera's set up, it might be autofocusing on the wrong thing, and it might be that it's focusing on the antenna at the front and the rest of the bee is going to be blurry. So using manual focus enables you to focus on the part of the image that you want to. Yeah.
So the F is depth of field, is the A so the aperture?
No, depth of field and aperture, same thing. The F, the aperture, and the depth of field is all the same thing, different ways. So the aperture is the size of that circle, the f-stop is the number, and the depth of field is what you're doing by changing the number. So
what is the IS?
that's the speed of the film. And it sounds funny when we talk digital, but when we had print film, you might remember you could buy a 100 film or a 200 or an 800. An 800 is good on a cloudy day because it gives you more light. But if you want to make a picture, it will be grainy. But on digital cameras, I don't really know what it means for a digital camera because you're not using a print film, but apparently it's still relevant. See, I said I wasn't a professional. And my camera just does an ISO that it likes compared to something else that I've done. Yeah, so the 140 is the zoom. The 125th is the speed. So it's like that fast. It's pretty fast, but you can have up to 1/1000th of a second. So that's ultra fast, but you won't get a lot of light in. So then you'll start thinking about flash or something else. The aperture also impacts light, but I'm sure you don't care too much about that. I'll move on. So this was the third prize photograph that I took with my iPhone 5S. Like, it's a really old basic model. And I think the thing about this is it's got a couple of little bees, so it's a little bit interesting because not only have I captured the smoke drifting, and see, this is a slower shutter speed. If it was faster, the smoke would be clearer. Because it's a bit slower, it's got the impression that the smoke's actually moving. But I thought it looked really cool. And this was when I did my course, so I was all very excited and loving every moment of bees. And just actually capturing a couple of bees down in the bottom of the picture, I guess people like that. So, as I said, they're just photographs. I'm sure you've all got really beautiful photographs that you've taken as well. I'll just show you, yep.
Can I just interrupt? On your phone, how do you adjust the speed on your phone?
I don't know. I've got an iPhone 5S and it doesn't let me do anything.
That's the speed it shows.
It did. Yeah, so it's automatically set up, so it doesn't have a lot of options, but it usually does pretty good photographs. Yeah.
Expert ones got in there or something like
The
that.
new ones do. I found the Androids tend to be better. Yeah, okay. Mine has no settings. Yeah. For the iPhone? Because when I download onto my computer, when I look at the info for the photograph, it tells me. Yeah, so I brought it up. There might be a way you can do it on your phone, but actually it captures data. So when you take a picture on your phone, you know it captures the GPS data, so it will tell you where you took the photograph. Same thing, it's captured the settings that it used for the photograph, but there might be ways of changing it. I don't on this one. When I get a new phone, I'll learn a little bit more about the camera functionality. Yep. So these are just some other images that I took as well. And again, this is not a flat flower, but one that the bee snuck into. But these are those big trumpet lilies, if you know those. So you can actually get the lens up inside there as well and intrude on the bee. But she seemed to go about her business anyway. Having two bees, I think, in a photograph is really interesting. Having bees interact with each other is great for photographs. I've got a lot of lavender at my place, so there's got lots of pictures of bees in the lavender. This is really interesting because it looks funny because both the wings are in together. And I always thought maybe this is a different type of bee because it doesn't looks a bit strange. But once again, this aperture, the background is a little bit blurry, but not a lot. So the depth of field is bigger. So more of the photograph is in focus than if I had zoomed in. This one, I think, was with my iPhone as well. So this one, the bee's tongue is out. Can you see that over there? Just here. So fluke, total fluke. I didn't say poke your tongue out. I just happened to press the shutter at the time when the bee's tongue was out.
So you only saw that once you looked at your photo?
Yeah. So that's the other thing. I don't actually spend a lot of time checking the image while I'm shooting. I just keep going. I'll every now and again look just in case they're all bad or I've done something horrendously wrong. But I usually just keep shooting and mucking around, and then that's later when the sun's gone down, I'll sit inside and muck around. So really blurry background. Focusing, the flower and the bee are reasonably in focus, and even the veins in the wings you can see there. I haven't manipulated these. So the reason I showed this one, it's not a great picture. As I said, I haven't cracked this yet, but there's two bees flying towards a flower. That's cool, that's good timing. This bee with the pollen pants, she's a bit more in focus than the other one, but just to show you that this is really hard to do these ones, and I'm going to keep practicing because it's my dream to get a really clear image of a bee flying towards a flower. But this just shows that, you know, when I was talking about the focus, it'll focus on one part, but you need to make sure that you've got your camera set up that it focuses on everything in the frame, which is maybe why manual focus then would have been better than auto, because it's just captured this and not worried too much about that. Again, this is, it's a bit hard to see these, but this is just on the front doorstep, on the veranda of the hive at home, and just a bit of bee interaction, which I always really liked, seeing them hang out together and doing things together. What bee is this? Does anyone know? It's got a funny marking on it, hasn't it? Somebody told me, I forgot. I was hoping somebody would know.
I see them around.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
It's a bit bigger and they make a different buzz.
Yeah, and the other interesting thing, this was very slow and dopey, this one, and I hadn't realised it had a different pattern until I actually looked at it on the screen and expanded and cropped in, that I saw that it was actually a different type of bee, so that'll be my homework to find out. So then I said it's not just pictures of bees on flowers, which is what I tend to do a lot of, but you can actually start, without interrupting your bees too much, take a picture. This was with my iPhone while I've got my gloves and everything on while I'm doing an inspection. And you can get all the different things that are going on in your hive. You've got the honey, the capped honey and the nectar and pollen and brood and bees doing their thing. So I like to take a lot of pictures if I've got the time when I'm doing an inspection as well. Obviously, it's good to go back afterwards and you can have a really good study of what's going on in the hive. Just different perspectives. This was a much larger picture that I've cropped in, again, just with the light shining on the honeycomb, and they're just starting to fill this one up with honey. I thought that was not just with the angles. Looked pretty good. And again, I get really close. I am lying on the ground, basically resting my chin on the veranda of the hive to get this photograph. Again, this is just with the iPhone. So just to play around, I just lie around and stare at my bees, a bit of a stalker, and I have hundreds of pictures like this. But they sort of get used to being there. This was a swarm collection, getting in nice and close, beautiful, shiny honey. This is the one we went to at Coldstream. Yep. Okay, so these are the images that I had planned to have there of more of mine, and they're not, so it's good news for you. So this is one of my photographs, and when I talked about that sort of post-production and the manipulation, there's a setting on something that I've got somewhere. It might be an app on my phone that turns photographs into paintings. And so that's what I've done with this one. It was a photograph and I pressed turn it into a painting shot, and now I have a painting of one of my bees on the lavender. So that was just to show you that you can start playing around once you get into it and if you've got the spare time, like I clearly do. So these are just general photography tips. Always take your camera, get in really close, muck around every day. So one of the things if you're doing a photography course they'll tell you is take a photograph every day. Sometimes they say take a selfie every day because you then get bored of taking a picture of yourself every day, so you start getting creative. You start thinking, what else can I do to make this interesting? So use your camera a lot. Watch for shadows, see the light. Think about if you need to turn the flash on if you've got a lot of shadows over the image. Ask permission. So you've got to ask your bees, can I please take your photograph? Get them to sign a waiver. The kids might be underage. Using flash during the day, use it. It's not just a nighttime thing. There are times during the day when you want to put your flash on. F4, that's if you go to your f-stop or aperture. If you're in a hurry and you're in manual, 4 is the one that's going to take a pretty good photo without messing too much up. I wonder what that 8 says. Read the manual. Read the manual of your camera. Slow down. Take your time. Framing, think about, I don't know, I mean, I know some people are good at some things and not others, but the number of photographs I see with people's heads chopped off and feet chopped off or people over there and just nothing there. You know, composition and construction of the photograph is important. You can play around with it, but slow down, take your time, and actually have a look at what you're seeing at the time you're taking the photograph. It gives you more options. Framing, be present, like be there with the bees doing that, taking that photograph. Don't be thinking about what you're having for dinner or doing something else. Just be present at the time. Charge your batteries. Make sure you've got your card in your camera. Keep it simple. Don't try and be too crazy. Be part of a community. Yeah, let's go out with a bunch of us, go out with our cameras and take some photographs sometimes and compare them and have a slide night together. Talk about it, learn from each other. The golden hour, the hour before sunrise, the hour before sunrise, and the hour before sunset. Don't get bogged down by equipment. You know, these are pretty good these days. You can take some amazing photographs with your camera. Perspective. Think about storytelling. I sometimes, think about what story you're telling by taking this photograph. Don't spend too much time post-processing. Or do what you want. You can muck around. Sometimes if you spend the time, you'll take a beautiful image and you don't want to touch it. I find when I post photographs on Instagram, I might muck around with filters and other things. I reckon you can always tell, and it never looks as good. It might be vibrant and bright, but the resolution, you lose it. So take a good image to start with, and you're likely to get a really clear, good resolution, less grainy photograph. Get your subject to relax. It's really important. If the bees could just hold still, don't put them in the fridge. Be patient, persevere, just keep going. I sometimes go out, sometimes I'm not in the mood. I feel like going out and taking photographs, and I'm doing it because I thought, I should go and take photographs. I often find the best pictures are ones that I don't plan to take, the more spontaneous. So I just happen to I'll go for a walk and have my iPhone in my pocket, and I'll take a good photograph. But if I go walking in the bush with my camera, I often don't feel like taking photographs. So sometimes you won't feel like it. Break the rules. So you know how I broke the rules there? Do you see that? There's 21. So we've done all this, the technical stuff, what camera are you going to use, what are all the settings, the other stuff. So in-flight entertainment, that's that capturing a photograph of a bee in flight. I reckon that's the golden nugget. That's the one I want to crack. Italian poses. So somebody asked me when I won that prize, how did I take that photograph? And so my response, smart-ass, was, we're recording, can we say that? My bees are Italian. I got my bees, the Queen was imported from Kangaroo Island because I'm a South Australian, very patriotic, and she was a pure Italian, and so now all my bees are pure Italian South Australians and they love posing. So that's when I said, get to know your subject and be patient. I say my Italian bees hang around just waiting for me to photograph them. That's how you get good ones. And manipulation, that's that mucking around. Turn them into paintings if you like, or sketches or something else. So now, none of these are mine. I have no permission to use them. So let's just enjoy the magnificence, I'll come back to that, the magnificence of other people's images. So that's very crisp in the front, isn't it? Yep. Yeah, so there you see that depth of field that's going on there. So got alongside of the bee, so you've not got the front end in focus and the back end out of focus. Get alongside, and then the blurry at the back and really sharp in the front. So you see the back end, the bum shot, the bum's blurry, the face is focused. So when you start to take a picture at the front of the bee, you're going to get blurriness at the back. So if you want the whole bee in focus, you want to get alongside. Again, the flat surface of the flower is going to enable you to get much more clarity with the bee and not lose any of the features. And again, it's not always just about taking pictures of bees. It's about taking photographs of bee-related things. The bum shot. Sometimes they're really cool.
Looks like there's some smoke coming out of the back.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah. A bee fart. And the other interesting thing I like about this is see the perspective, see the angle. It's not being tied it up and make it really flat. Sometimes having angles, and this is about composition, it makes it a bit interesting. And actually, I did a photography course once, and we actually read photographs like we read a book. So we read from left to right. So you want your story to not start too early on the left side. So usually you'll put your subject or the interesting thing more to the right of the photograph because we always read across that way. So that's leading our eyes from the bottom left-hand corner up. So that's just interesting, bee-related things. I quite like that picture. Bees have been around for a long time. Another one with the face, we might have had that one. And then, wow, You'd really need a very good lens, macro lens, to get in close to get pictures of the larvae. And a bee being born. Another bum shot. So I think you can learn so much about bees by photographs because you can just study them when they're still. It's amazing, isn't it? Yep. Look at that, it's amazing. Yeah. Look at this one. Isn't that amazing? Yeah. So the bee chain. So a lot of the websites or the Instagram sites that I follow, as I said, they're educational. This photograph came with a whole explanation about what's going on here and what's happening. So you're not just looking at beautiful photographs, you're actually learning a lot as well. It's not what it looks like. A piggyback ride. So again, I think bees interacting with each other in photographs is always fun. And then I talked before about thinking about what else is going on. It's just some hives, but a magnificent sky. That might be some few more. Different take on an eclipse? Yeah. So I don't know whether that's real or if it's a manipulation of an image on an image. It's clever, isn't it? So this is not a photograph. Well, it is now because it's on my phone. There's a woman, Autumn Sky. She does beautiful artwork in the US, and she does gold leaf, whatever it's called, and she paints the images. And I've just bought the poster of this actually, and the child and the bee, the gold bits are the gold plating, the fleck. It's just magnificent. Yeah, that's all. So I had to really spend a lot of time cutting down. There are magnificent photographs. Just looking at them, it just makes me smile and it makes me happy. And maybe one day, if I keep practicing and be patient, I'll be able to take some images as good as those. But thank you for my very amateurish presentation. Have fun and take lots of pictures and maybe bring them in and we can all share them at some stage in the meeting. I'll leave that there.
Go away. You're not escaping here.
Have you got a question? This is funny.
No, I haven't got a question, but I do have a small token.
Oh, thank you. Oh, you should. Oh, it's late and everything.
Oh, okay. No.
Thank you. Thanks so much for listening. I was very privileged to be asked. So.
Thank you so much for sharing with us. That is terrific. Wonderful. So there you are, guys. There's the challenge.